The auctioneer's gavel struck wood 3 times, each crack echoing through the dusty saloon like a death knell, and Daisy Bennett felt her stomach turn to ice as she realized her father's gambling debts had just sealed her fate to become property of the highest bidder. She stood on the makeshift platform in her best calico dress, the blue fabric faded from too many washings, her dark hair pinned back in a simple bun that did nothing to hide the terror in her green eyes. The year was 1882, and Hawthorne, Nevada was a silver mining town where fortunes changed hands as quickly as bullets in a gunfight. Her father had lost everything at the card tables, then lost his life to whiskey poisoning 3 weeks later, leaving her with nothing but his debts and the cruel mercy of his creditors who decided a young woman could fetch enough money to settle accounts. 18 years old, healthy, can cook and sew, the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying over the crowd of miners, ranchers, and drifters who had gathered for the spectacle. Daisy wanted to die from the shame of it, wanted to disappear into the floorboards, but she stood straight, refusing to let them see her cry. $500, Gima, came a voice from the back, and Daisy's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. Clarence Murdoch, a wealthy mine owner who had buried 3 wives already. He was 60, if he was a day, with liver-spotted hands and breath that smelled of cigars and decay. He smiled at her with yellow teeth, his eyes crawling over her body like spiders. The auctioneer nodded. 500 from Mr. Murdoch. Do I hear 6? Silence filled the saloon. No one wanted to cross Murdoch, who owned half the silver claims in the region and had the sheriff in his pocket. Daisy felt her knees weaken. This could not be happening. She had known poverty, had known hunger, but she had never imagined being sold like cattle to a man old enough to be her grandfather. 500 going once, the auctioneer said. Daisy closed her eyes, praying for any kind of miracle, any intervention from God or devil that might spare her this fate. 500 going twice. $1,000. The voice cut through the room like a knife, clear and strong, with an accent that spoke of Texas ranges and long cattle drives. Every head turned toward the door where a tall cowboy stood, dust covering his boots and chaps, his hat pulled low over his face. He stepped into the lamplight, and Daisy caught her breath. He was young, perhaps 24 or 25, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble gave him a rugged appearance, but there was something in his expression that was not cruel, not hungry like the other men. He looked almost angry. "Who the hell are you?" Murdoch demanded, rising from his chair. "Name's Samuel Reeves," the cowboy said, his hand resting casually near the pistol at his hip. "And I just bid $1,000. The auctioneer looked between Murdoch and the stranger, clearly nervous. That's 1,000 from the gentleman. Mr. Murdoch?" Murdoch's face had turned purple. 1,100. 1,500, Samuel said without hesitation. "This is ridiculous," Murdoch sputtered. "I know you, Reeves. You are just a ranch hand for the Circle T. You do not have that kind of money." Samuel reached into his vest and pulled out a leather pouch, tossing it onto the nearest table. Gold coins spilled out, glinting in the lamplight. 3 years of cattle drives to Montana. Saved every penny. Count it if you want. Daisy stared at him, unable to understand what was happening. Why would a stranger spend his life savings on her? Murdoch stood rigid, his hands clenched into fists. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, but even he could not justify spending more than $1,500. His face twisted with rage, but he sat back down heavily. "Take her then. But you are making an enemy tonight, Reeves." "I will add that to the list," Samuel said calmly. The auctioneer banged his gavel quickly, eager to end the tension. Sold to Samuel Reeves for $1,500. Daisy's head spun. She had gone from being Murdoch's property to this stranger's property in a matter of moments. Her legs finally gave out, and she sank to her knees on the platform, unable to process what had just happened. Samuel crossed the room in long strides, collecting his payment from the auctioneer and receiving a hastily scrawled bill of sale in return. Then he turned to Daisy, and for the first time their eyes met directly. Up close, she could see that his gray eyes held something like compassion, maybe even regret. "Can you stand?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His palm was calloused and rough, but his grip was gentle as he helped her to her feet. "Do you have belonging, Bijou?" he asked. "A bag," she whispered, "at the boarding house." "We will get it." He guided her through the crowd, his hand at her elbow, protective rather than possessive. The other men watched them go, some with disappointment, others with curiosity. Murdoch's glare burned into her back, and she knew she had made a powerful enemy by proxy. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp, scented with sage and dust. Daisy gulped it down, trying to steady herself. Samuel's horse stood tied to the rail, a big buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes. "The boarding house is 2 streets over," she managed to say. They walked in silence through the dark streets of Hawthorne. The town was rough even by frontier standards, built around the silver mines with little thought for anything but extraction and profit. Daisy had lived here for 2 years since her father dragged her west from Missouri, chasing rumors of easy money. Instead, he had found cards and whiskey and an early grave. The boarding house was run by Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman whose husband had died building the railroad. She looked up from her mending when Daisy entered, her eyes moving from the girl to the cowboy and back again. "I am leaving, Mrs. Chen," Daisy said softly. "Thank you for your kindness." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. She had been at the saloon, had seen what happened. She rose and disappeared into the back, returning with Daisy's carpet bag, which contained everything she owned in the world: 2 dresses, undergarments, her mother's Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. "Be safe," Mrs. Chen said, pressing the bag into Daisy's hands and adding something else, a small cloth bundle that smelled of herbs. "For tea, when you're frightened." Tears finally spilled down Daisy's cheeks. "Thank you." Back outside, Samuel took the carpet bag and secured it to his saddle. Then he turned to face her, and in the moonlight she could see his expression was serious but not threatening. "I need to say something before we go any further," he said. "I know what you are thinking, that I bought you, that you are my property now, that I am going to force you to be my wife or my woman." Daisy's throat tightened, but she nodded. "That is not why I did this," Samuel continued. "I could not stand there and watch Murdoch take you. I have seen what he does to women. My own aunt was his second wife. She died under suspicious circumstances. I was 15 when it happened, too young to do anything about it, but I swore I would never let him hurt another woman if I could prevent it." Daisy's eyes widened. "Then why did you bid?" "Because in the eyes of the law, someone had to buy you to clear your father's debts. If I had not, Murdoch would have. But here's the truth of it." He pulled the bill of sale from his pocket and held it out to her. "This paper says you belong to me. I am giving you a choice. We can go to the sheriff right now, and I will sign manumission papers freeing you from any obligation. You will be your own woman, free and clear, or, she whispered, "or you can come with me to the Circle T Ranch where I work. The owner, Tom Brennan, is a good man. His wife died last year, and he has been struggling to manage the house and cook for the ranch hands while running the operation. He has been looking for help. You would have a job, a room of your own, fair wages, no obligation to me beyond honest work, and when you have saved enough money, you can go wherever you want." Daisy stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You would just let me go after spending $1,500? Samuel's jaw tightened. "That money does not matter. What matters is that you have a choice. Maybe the first real choice you have had in a long time." She looked down at the bill of sale in her hands, the ink still wet, her name written there like a brand. Then she looked at this strange cowboy who had just upended his entire life to save hers, expecting nothing in return. "I do not want to be alone in this town," she said slowly. "Murdoch will find ways to make my life hell, and I have no money, no prospects. If you're telling the truth, if this job is real, then I want to come with you. Samuel nodded. Fair enough. The ranch is about 20 miles east, up in the hills. We can be there by morning if we ride through the night, or we can wait until dawn and take our time. Let us go now, Daisy said. I want to be far away from here. He untied his horse and climbed into the saddle, then offered his hand again. She took it, and he swung her up behind him with surprising ease. She had never ridden like this before, pressed against a man's back, her arms around his waist. It felt intimate and terrifying and strangely safe all at once. Hold on, Samuel said, and urged the buckskin forward. They rode through the dark streets of Hawthorne and out into the desert beyond. The moon was 3/4 full, casting silver light over the sagebrush and rocky hills. The air grew colder, and Daisy pressed closer to Samuel's back, grateful for his warmth. His body was solid and strong, moving easily with the horse's gait, and she found herself wondering about him. Why would a cowboy save 3 years' worth of wages to rescue a stranger? What kind of man did something like that? After an hour of riding, Samuel slowed the horse and turned his head slightly. You doing all right back there? Yes, she said, and thank you for everything. Do not thank me yet, he said. You have not met Tom Brennan. He is a good man, but gruff as a bear, and the work is hard. I am not afraid of hard work. I believe you. They rode on in silence for a while, climbing into the hills where the air smelled of pine and juniper. Daisy felt exhaustion pulling at her, the terror of the evening catching up with her body. Without meaning to, she found her head drooping against Samuel's back, her eyes closing. She woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and realized dawn had broken. She was lying on a bedroll under a canvas lean-to covered with a thick wool blanket. Samuel sat nearby, feeding small sticks to a campfire and setting a coffee pot to boil. When he saw she was awake, he nodded to her. Morning. We made it about 15 miles before you fell asleep. Figured we could both use a few hours' rest. Daisy sat up, embarrassed. I am sorry. I did not mean to fall asleep on you like that. Nothing to apologize for. You have been through hell. He poured coffee into a tin cup and offered it to her. It is not much, but it will warm you up. She took the cup gratefully, wrapping her hands around it and breathing in the bitter steam. Samuel had laid out some jerky and hardtack for breakfast, cowboy fare that was not appetizing but was filling. They ate in companionable silence, watching the sun rise over the Nevada hills. Can I ask you something? Daisy said finally. Sure. Your aunt, the one who was married to Murdoch, what was her name? Samuel's expression darkened. Rachel. Rachel Cortez before she married that bastard. She was my mother's younger sister, only 23 when she died. Murdoch said she fell down the stairs, but there were bruises on her neck. Nobody questioned it, though. He had too much money, too much power. I am so sorry, Daisy said softly. It was 10 years ago, but I have never forgotten. When I heard about the auction, heard that Murdoch was planning to buy you, I knew I had to do something. Spent the last 2 days riding hell for leather to get my savings from the bank in Silver Springs. He looked at her directly. I do not regret it. Daisy felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. This man was a stranger, but he had shown her more kindness in one night than her own father had in the last 5 years. I will work hard, she promised, at the ranch. I will earn my keep. I know you will. They finished breakfast and packed up the camp. Samuel offered to let Daisy ride in the saddle this time while he walked, but she insisted she was fine behind him. Truth was, she liked being close to him, liked the solid steadiness of his presence. It made her feel less alone. The last 5 miles took them through beautiful country, pine-covered hills that opened onto a valley with a river running through it. The Circle T Ranch spread across the valley floor, a main house made of logs and stone, a large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. Cattle grazed on the hillsides, hundreds of them, and Daisy could see several cowboys working in the distance. Samuel rode straight to the main house and dismounted, then helped Daisy down. She smoothed her dress nervously, aware of how travel-stained and rumpled she must look. The front door opened, and a big man stepped out onto the porch. Tom Brennan was in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the sun. His eyes were sharp and assessing as they took in Daisy. "Samuel," he said, "you're back early, and you brought company." "Yes, sir, this is Daisy Bennett. I was hoping you might still be looking for help around the house." Tom's eyebrows rose. "Is that so?" Samuel took a breath. "It is a long story, Tom, but the short version is that Daisy's father died and left her with debts. She was being auctioned off in Hawthorne to settle them. I intervened. She's a hard worker, good cook, and she needs a place to land on her feet. I told her you might have a job for her." Tom was quiet for a long moment, studying both of them. Finally, he nodded. "Come inside, both of you. Let us talk." The interior of the house was neat, but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was solid and practical, the floors clean but unadorned. They sat at a large kitchen table, and Tom poured whiskey for himself and Samuel, offering Daisy water. "Tell me the whole story," Tom said. Samuel did, explaining about his aunt, about the auction, about the choice he had offered Daisy. Tom listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Samuel finished, Tom turned to Daisy. "You can cook?" "Yes, sir. My mother taught me before she died. I can make bread, stews, roasts, pies. I can preserve food, manage a kitchen, and do laundry. I worked at the boarding house in Hawthorne to pay for my room." "And you are willing to work hard?" "Yes, sir. I know I'm in a difficult position, and I'm grateful for any opportunity." Tom nodded slowly. "All right, here is my offer. I need someone to manage the house, cook 3 meals a day for myself and the hands, and keep things in order. The work is hard, the hours are long, and the pay is $30 a month plus room and board. You will have your own room in the house, and you will be treated with respect by every man on this ranch, or they will answer to me. Do we have an agreement?" Daisy's eyes widened. $30 a month was more than she had dared hope for. "Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Brennan." "Call me Tom. Mr. Brennan was my father." He stood and offered his hand, and Daisy shook it, feeling the strength in his grip. "Samuel, show her to the spare room and help her get settled. Then I need you to ride out to the north pasture. We have had some trouble with rustlers." "Yes, sir," Samuel said. He led Daisy upstairs to a small room at the back of the house. It had a single bed with a real mattress, a dresser, a chair, and a window that looked out over the valley. It was simple but clean, and it was more than Daisy had dared to dream of. "This is yours," Samuel said, setting her carpetbag on the bed. "The washroom is down the hall. There is a pump in the kitchen for water. Tom usually eats breakfast at 6, lunch at noon, and dinner at 7. The hands eat in shifts." "How many hands are there?" 8, including me. Most of them are good men. A couple are rough around the edges, but they will not bother you. Tom does not tolerate that." Daisy turned to face him, suddenly overwhelmed. "Samuel, I do not know how to thank you. You saved my life." He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You do not owe me anything, Daisy. Just make a good life for yourself. That is all the thanks I need." "But you spent all your savings, 3 years of work." "Money can be earned again. You only get one life." He tipped his hat to her. "I need to get to work. If you need anything, Tom will help you. Welcome to the Circle T." He left, his boots echoing on the wooden stairs, and Daisy sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of the last 24 hours. She had been sold like property, saved by a stranger, and given a chance at a new life. Her hands trembled as she opened her carpetbag and pulled out her mother's Bible, pressing it to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered to whatever power might be listening. "Thank you for Samuel Reeves." Over the next weeks, Daisy settled into life at the Circle T Ranch. The work was indeed hard. Rising before dawn to start breakfast, baking bread, preparing meals for 10 hungry men, washing dishes and laundry, and maintaining the house. But it was honest work, And for the first time in years, Daisy felt like she had a purpose beyond mere survival. Tom Brennan was gruff but fair, and she quickly learned that his bark was worse than his bite. He taught her how he liked his coffee, showed her where the root cellar and smokehouse were, and gave her free rein to manage the kitchen as she saw fit. The ranch hands were a mixed group. There was old Pete, who had been a cowboy for 40 years and told stories that made Daisy blush. There were the Johnson brothers, twins who finished each other's sentences. There was Carlos, who played guitar in the evenings. And there was Samuel. Samuel was different from the others. He worked harder, rode better, and spoke less. He was respected by the other hands, and even Tom seemed to rely on him more than the others. But around Daisy he was always polite, always distant, as if he was afraid of making her uncomfortable. She found herself watching for him at meals, listening for his voice among the others. When he came in from the range, dust-covered and exhausted, she would make sure his coffee was hot and his plate was full. She told herself it was just gratitude, just repaying kindness, but in her heart she knew it was something more. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Daisy was cleaning up after dinner when Samuel came to the kitchen with his dirty plate. The other hands had already left, and Tom had gone to his study to work on accounts. "Thank you for dinner," Samuel said. "The stew was excellent." "You say that every night," Daisy said, smiling despite herself. "Because it is true every night. You are a fine cook." She took the plate from him, and their fingers brushed. It was a brief contact, but she felt it like electricity. "Samuel," she said impulsively, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you avoid me?" He looked startled. "I do not avoid you." "Yes, you do. You barely look at me. You never sit near me at meals. If I come into a room, you find a reason to leave. Is it because you regret what you did? Regret spending your money on me?" "No," he said firmly. "It is not that at all." "Then what is it?" Samuel ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I do not want you to feel obligated to me, Daisy. I told you that you do not owe me anything, and I meant it. I keep my distance because I do not want you to think I expect something in return for what I did." "And what if I want you closer?" The words were out before she could stop them, and she felt her face flush. "I mean, as a friend. You are the only real friend I have here." Samuel's gray eyes searched her face. "Is that what you want? To be friends?" "Yes," she said, though her heart was pounding with feelings that went far beyond friendship. He nodded slowly. "Then friends we are." After that, things changed between them. Samuel stopped avoiding her, and they began to talk in the evenings after the work was done. He told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, about his parents who died of fever when he was 16, about drifting north and finding work on the Circle T. She told him about her childhood in Missouri, about her mother who had been kind and gentle, about her father's slow descent into gambling and drink. They discovered they both loved reading, though good books were scarce on the ranch. Samuel lent her a worn copy of Ivanhoe, and she read it by lamplight in her room, treasuring every page. They talked about the places they wanted to see someday, the lives they wanted to build, and slowly, carefully, Daisy felt herself falling in love. It was in the way Samuel smiled at her across the dinner table, in the way he always made sure she had firewood for the stove, in the way he listened to her like her words actually mattered. It was in the gentle strength of his hands and the kindness in his eyes and the way he treated her like a person, not property. But she said nothing, afraid to ruin the fragile friendship they had built. She did not know if he felt the same way, and she could not bear the thought of making him uncomfortable or, worse, making him regret what he had done for her. Summer turned to autumn, and the ranch work intensified as they prepared for winter. The cattle had to be moved to lower pastures, hay had to be cut and stored, and preparations had to be made for the hard months ahead. Samuel worked from dawn to dusk, coming in so exhausted he could barely eat before falling into bed. One October evening he did not come in for dinner at all. Daisy kept his plate warm, watching the door and growing increasingly worried. Finally, she could not stand it anymore. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and went out to the barn. She found him there, tending to a horse with a badly injured leg, The animal was in pain, tossing its head and trying to kick, but Samuel spoke to it in low, soothing tones, working carefully to clean and bandage the wound. "Samuel?" Daisy said softly. He looked up, surprised to see her. "What are you doing out here? It is cold." "You missed dinner. I was worried." "I'm sorry. Ranger here stepped in a gopher hole. I've been trying to get him settled." He patted the horse's neck. "There you go, boy. You're going to be all right." Daisy came closer, watching Samuel work. His hands were gentle despite their strength, and the horse seemed to calm under his touch. "You have a gift with animals," she observed. "My father taught me. He always said animals could sense your heart. If you are good to them, they will be good to you." He finished the bandaging and gave the horse one final pat before turning to Daisy. "You should not be out here alone at night. Let me walk you back." They left the barn together, and Daisy was acutely aware of how close Samuel was walking beside her. The night was clear and cold. Stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. "Daisy," Samuel said suddenly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "What is it?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. In the moonlight, his expression was serious, almost pained. "I've been trying to keep my distance from you, trying to do the right thing, but it is getting harder every day." "I do not understand," she whispered, though she hoped she did. "I am in love with you," Samuel said simply. "I have been for months now. Maybe since the moment I first saw you on that platform looking so scared and brave at the same time. But I swore I would not tell you because I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated. You are free to choose your own path, and that includes choosing someone else or choosing no one at all. I just could not go on pretending anymore." Daisy felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Samuel Reeves, you are the most stubborn, noble, ridiculous man I have ever met." He looked confused. "What?" "I have been in love with you since you gave me a choice that night in Hawthorne, since you treated me like a human being instead of property, since you showed me what a good man looks like." She stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I choose you, Samuel. I have always chosen you." His eyes widened, and then his hands came up to cup her face, his touch achingly gentle. "Are you sure? I am just a cowboy with no prospects beyond my next paycheck. I cannot give you a fancy life." "I do not want a fancy life. I want a real life. With you." Samuel leaned down and kissed her, and Daisy felt like every cold, frightening thing she had ever experienced melted away in the warmth of his embrace. His lips were soft but certain, his arms strong as they wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. She kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and hope she had been carrying in her heart. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Daisy Bennett. I love you too." They stood there in the moonlight holding each other, and Daisy thought about the strange path that had brought her to this moment. The pain and fear had been real, but they had led her to something real and good and true. She had been saved by this man, and now she was choosing to love him with her whole heart. "We should probably tell Tom," Samuel said eventually. "He has a right to know if his housekeeper and one of his hands are courting. Do you think he will mind?" "Tom? No. He is a romantic at heart, though he would never admit it. He loved his wife something fierce." They walked back to the house, hand in hand, and Daisy felt like she was floating. Everything had changed in a matter of minutes, and yet somehow it felt like this had been inevitable from the very beginning. Tom was still in his study, and he looked up with mild surprise when they knocked on the door frame together. "Something wrong?" "No, sir," Samuel said. "We just wanted to inform you that Daisy and I are courting. I wanted you to hear it from us directly." Tom studied them for a moment, then a rare smile crossed his weathered face. "About damn time. I have been watching you two dance around each other for months. Just make sure your courting does not interfere with your work." "It will not, sir," they said in unison. "And Samuel, you treat this young woman right, or you will answer to me." "I will, sir. You have my word." Tom waved them away. "Get out of here. And Daisy, thank you for saving me dinner. I will eat it before bed." Outside the study, Daisy and Samuel grinned at each other like children who had gotten away with something wonderful. Samuel walked her to the stairs, then kissed her goodnight with a sweetness that made her knees weak. "Sleep well," he murmured against her lips. "You too." Daisy floated up to her room, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She prepared for bed in a daze, then knelt beside her mattress to pray, thanking God for his strange mercy in bringing her to this place, to this man, to this chance at happiness. The next months were the happiest of Daisy's life. She and Samuel courted properly, taking walks on Sunday afternoons, sitting together at meals, stealing kisses when they thought no one was looking. The other ranch hands teased them good-naturedly, and even old Pete admitted they made a fine couple. Winter came to the Nevada hills, bringing snow and bitter cold. The work on the ranch slowed, and the hands spent more time in the bunkhouse playing cards and telling stories. Daisy and Samuel would sit by the fire in the main house in the evenings, reading together or just talking about their dreams for the future. "I want my own ranch someday," Samuel confessed one night. "Nothing huge, just enough land for a small herd and a family." "A family?" Daisy asked softly. He looked at her, his gray eyes warm. "I want children, Daisy. 3 or 4 of them running wild and free. I want to teach my sons to ride and my daughters to be strong. I want to build something that lasts." "I want that too," she said. "I want a home, a real home, filled with love and laughter. I want to grow old with someone who truly cares for me." Samuel took her hand. "Marry me, Daisy. I know we have not been courting long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to build that future with you." Daisy's breath caught. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. I love you. I want you to be my wife, my partner, and everything. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." Samuel pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and Daisy felt like her heart would explode from sheer joy. They held each other for a long time, making whispered plans for their future, dreaming together. They told Tom the next morning, and he was genuinely pleased. "I will host the wedding here at the ranch," he insisted. "We will invite the neighboring ranchers, make a real celebration of it." "You do not have to do that," Daisy protested. "I want to. You two have brought life back to this house. Let me do this for you." They set the date for early March, after the worst of winter had passed. Daisy sewed her own wedding dress with fabric that Samuel bought for her in town. A simple but beautiful gown in cream-colored cotton. She worked on it in the evenings, her fingers flying over the stitches, dreaming of the day she would become Mrs. Samuel Reeves. But their happiness was not to go unchallenged. In February, a rider came to the ranch with troubling news. Clarence Murdoch was making inquiries about Daisy's whereabouts. He claimed she was still legally his property, that Samuel had never filed the proper manumission papers, and he was threatening legal action to reclaim her. Samuel's face went white with rage. "I will kill him before I let him touch you." "No," Tom said firmly. "Violence will only make this worse. We need to handle this legally. Samuel, ride to Silver Springs and get a lawyer. We will fight this in court if we have to." Samuel did not want to leave Daisy, but he had no choice. He rode out the next morning, promising to return as soon as possible. Daisy tried to keep busy with her work, but fear gnawed at her constantly. What if Murdoch succeeded? What if she was forced to go back to him? Tom tried to reassure her. "That piece of paper Samuel gave you, that bill of sale, do you still have it?" "Yes, in my room." "Good. That is proof of the transaction. And Nevada law allows for self-manumission after a period of service. You've been working here for 6 months, paying off your supposed debt with labor. A good lawyer should be able to argue that you are free and clear." But Daisy could not shake her fear. She had seen Murdoch's power, seen how he twisted the law to his own purposes. What if money and influence won out over justice? Samuel returned 5 days later with a lawyer named Harrison Blackwell, a sharp-eyed man from San Francisco who specialized in cases involving property rights and personal freedom. He interviewed Daisy extensively, took copies of all her documents, and assured her he would fight for her freedom with everything he had. Murdoch is trying to intimidate you, Ciara, Blackwell explained. He knows his claim is weak, but he is hoping you will be too frightened to fight back. We will not let that happen. The case went before a judge in Silver Springs in early March, just days before the wedding was supposed to take place. Daisy, Samuel, Tom, and Blackwell all made the journey to town, and Daisy felt sick with nerves the entire way. The courtroom was packed with spectators, many of them eager to see the powerful Clarence Murdoch taken down a peg. Murdoch himself sat at the plaintiff's table with his own lawyer, looking smug and confident. When his eyes met Daisy's, she saw pure malice there, and she pressed closer to Samuel's side. The proceedings were technical and complicated, full of legal language that Daisy barely understood, but the core argument was simple. Did Clarence Murdoch have legal claim to Daisy Bennett, or was she a free woman? Blackwell was brilliant. He argued that the original auction had been conducted under duress, that Daisy's father's debts had been settled by the payment, and that she had more than fulfilled any remaining obligation through her work at the Circle T. He presented testimony from Tom about Daisy's wages and labor, and he cited Nevada statutes about self-manumission and personal liberty. Murdoch's lawyer argued that the sale had been legal, that Samuel had purchased Daisy as property, and that without proper manumission papers filed with the county, she was still legally bound to Samuel, who could then be compelled to transfer ownership to Murdoch based on some obscure contractual technicality. It was a weak argument, but Murdoch had money and influence, and Daisy watched the judge's face anxiously, trying to gauge his thoughts. Finally, after hours of testimony and argument, the judge called for a recess. He returned an hour later and delivered his ruling. "I have reviewed the evidence and the arguments presented by both parties," he said in a grave voice. "It is clear to this court that Miss Daisy Bennett was placed in an untenable situation due to circumstances beyond her control. While the auction may have been conducted according to the letter of the law at the time, it offends the spirit of justice and human dignity. Furthermore, Miss Bennett has more than satisfied any debt through her labor and wages. I hereby rule that Daisy Bennett is a free woman with no legal obligation to Mr. Samuel Reeves, Mr. Clarence Murdoch, or any other party. All claims against her are dismissed." Daisy burst into tears of relief, and Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as the courtroom erupted in applause. Even the judge was smiling. Murdoch's face was purple with rage, but there was nothing he could do. The law had spoken. Outside the courthouse, Blackwell shook their hands warmly. "Congratulations. You are free and clear, Miss Bennett. Live your life well." "Thank you," Daisy said fervently. "Thank you so much." The ride back to the Circle T was joyous. Tom actually sang an old cowboy ballad, and Samuel held Daisy's hand the entire way, occasionally pulling her close to kiss her temple or her cheek. "We can still get married next week," he said, "if you still want to." "Of course I still want to," Daisy laughed. "Did you think a little thing like a court case would change my mind? I just wanted to make sure. You are free now, Daisy, truly free. You can do anything, go anywhere." "I know, and I choose to stay right here with you." The wedding took place on a beautiful March morning with wildflowers blooming across the valley and the sky a brilliant blue. Tom had indeed invited the neighboring ranchers, and nearly 50 people gathered at the Circle T to witness Daisy and Samuel exchange vows. Daisy wore her cream-colored dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Carlos had picked for her. Samuel wore his best suit, looking impossibly handsome despite his nervousness. They stood together under an arch that the ranch hands had built, and a traveling preacher from Silver Springs officiated. "Do you, Samuel Reeves, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Samuel said, his voice strong and certain, his eyes locked on Daisy's. "And do you, Daisy Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Daisy said, tears of joy streaming down her face. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Samuel cupped Daisy's face in his hands and kissed her softly, tenderly, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Daisy kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into that single moment. They were married. She was Mrs. Samuel Reeves, and she was the happiest woman in Nevada. The celebration lasted long into the night, with music and dancing and food and laughter. Tom had roasted a whole steer, and there was enough food to feed an army. The ranch hands played music, and couples danced under the stars. Daisy danced with Samuel, with Tom, with old Pete, and then with Samuel again, losing herself in the joy of the moment. As the night wore on, Samuel finally pulled her away from the crowd, leading her to the small cabin at the edge of the ranch property that Tom had given them as a wedding gift. It was modest but sturdy, with a main room, a small bedroom, and a kitchen. Samuel had spent the last weeks fixing it up, making sure everything was perfect for his bride. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reeves," he said, carrying her over the threshold. Daisy laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love you, Samuel." "I love you too, more than I can ever say." He set her down gently, and they stood in the middle of their new home, holding each other. Daisy felt overwhelmed by the goodness of it all, by the miracle of finding love in the midst of such darkness. "I was so scared that night in Hawthorne," she whispered. "I thought my life was over." "I know. But it was not over. It was just beginning. You gave me a choice, Samuel, and that choice led me here. To you, to this life, to happiness I never thought I would find." Samuel kissed her forehead. "You gave me something too, Daisy. You gave me a reason to build a future instead of just drifting from job to job. You gave me a home." They made love that night for the first time, tenderly and carefully, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Daisy had been nervous, but Samuel was patient and gentle, and what could have been frightening became beautiful instead. Afterwards, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, talking in whispers until they fell asleep. The next months and years unfolded like a beautiful dream. Samuel and Daisy settled into married life with surprising ease, working together to build their future. Samuel continued working for Tom, saving money with the goal of eventually buying their own land. Daisy still helped manage the main house, but she also focused on making their cabin a true home, sewing curtains, planting a vegetable garden, and filling the space with warmth and love. In the spring of 1883, Daisy discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel on a quiet evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. "A baby," he said, his eyes going wide. "We are going to have a baby?" "Yes, in November, I think." Samuel let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around before setting her down carefully, as if she might break. "We are going to be parents. I am going to be a father." "Are you happy?" Daisy asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not even begin to cover it. He kissed her thoroughly, then knelt down and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your papa's going to take such good care of you and your mama, I promise." Daisy ran her fingers through his hair, her heart overflowing. They had built something real and lasting, something that would continue beyond them. It felt like the ultimate victory over all the darkness that had come before. The pregnancy was not easy. Daisy suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and the Nevada heat that summer was brutal. But Samuel was attentive and loving, bringing her water, rubbing her aching back, and reading to her when she felt too sick to do anything else. Tom was delighted by the news and immediately began planning for the baby's arrival. He had a cradle built by a skilled carpenter in Silver Springs, and he made sure Daisy had everything she needed. The ranch hands were equally excited, with old Pete declaring that he would teach the baby to ride as soon as it could walk. In late November, Daisy went into labor on a cold, clear night. Samuel rode like the devil to fetch the midwife from the nearest town, and Tom stayed with Daisy, keeping her calm and comfortable until help arrived. The labor was long and hard, lasting nearly 20 hours. Samuel paced outside the bedroom door, nearly out of his mind with worry, until finally, just after dawn, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. The midwife opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Reeves, a healthy, strong son, and your wife is tired but doing well." Samuel rushed into the room and found Daisy propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Samuel, meet our son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had dark hair like Daisy, and gray eyes that might darken or might stay the color of storm clouds like his father's. He was perfect. "Can I hold him?" Samuel asked softly. Daisy placed the baby carefully in his arms, and Samuel felt his whole world shift. This was his son, his child. A piece of him and Daisy made flesh and blood. The responsibility was overwhelming, but so was the love that flooded through him. "What should we name him?" Daisy asked. They had discussed names for months, but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Samuel knew exactly what the boy's name should be. "How about Thomas?" he said, "after Tom, who gave us a chance and a place to call home." Daisy smiled. "Thomas Reeves. I love it." "Thomas Samuel Reeves," Samuel amended, "so he has a piece of both his grandfathers." When Tom came to visit later that day, he was uncharacteristically emotional upon learning the baby's name. "You did not have to do that," he said gruffly. "We wanted to," Daisy said. "You have been like a father to both of us." Tom held little Thomas with surprising gentleness for such a rough man, and the baby seemed content in his arms. "You are going to grow up strong, young man," he told the infant, "and loved, so very loved." The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel worked hard, and by 1885 he had saved enough to buy a small parcel of land adjacent to the Circle T. It was only 100 acres, but it was theirs, and they built a modest house on it with help from Tom and the ranch hands. They moved in when Thomas was 2 years old, and Daisy felt like she had finally achieved the dream she had held in her heart for so long. A home of her own. Samuel started building his herd slowly, buying a few cattle at a time and breeding them carefully. It was hard work, and there were setbacks, droughts, and harsh winters and illness among the animals. But Samuel was determined and patient, and gradually the ranch began to prosper. In 1886, Daisy gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she was spirited from the moment she drew breath. Thomas adored his little sister, following her around and trying to protect her from everything. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel worked the ranch with occasional help from the Circle T hands. Daisy managed the house, raised the children, and kept their small family running smoothly. They were not rich by any means, but they had enough. And more importantly, they had each other. The children grew like wildflowers, strong and free. Thomas was serious and thoughtful, already showing signs of his father's quiet strength. Grace was bold and adventurous, constantly getting into mischief. They played in the hills, learned to ride almost before they could walk, and grew up knowing they were deeply loved. In 1889, Daisy gave birth to their third child, another son they named James. He was the most laid back of the three children, content to observe the world with calm interest. The house was full of noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of a growing family. Samuel and Daisy still found time for each other, stealing moments alone when the children were asleep, sitting together on the porch and talking about their dreams and plans. The love between them had only deepened with time, weathering the challenges and joys of building a life together. One evening in the summer of 1890, they sat together watching the sunset over the Nevada hills, their children playing in the yard. Thomas was 8 now, Grace was 4, and James was 1. Samuel had his arm around Daisy's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth. "Do you ever think about that night in Hawthorne?" Daisy asked softly. "Sometimes," Samuel admitted. "It feels like another lifetime." I was so scared I thought I was going to be trapped in a nightmare forever. I know, I saw it in your eyes. That is why I could not walk away. Daisy turned to look at him. You saved me, Samuel. Not just from Murdoch, but from a life without love, without hope. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much, Samuel said. A home, a family, a reason to be a better man. Do you ever regret spending that money, giving up 3 years of savings? Samuel looked out at their land, their home, their children playing in the golden evening light. Not for a single second. That was the best investment I ever made. I traded gold for something infinitely more valuable. What is that? Love. Real, lasting love. The kind that builds something that matters. Daisy kissed him, soft and sweet, and felt the same wonder she had felt the first time he kissed her all those years ago. I love you, Samuel Reeves. I love you too, Daisy, always. Thomas came running up to the porch, breathless with excitement. Papa, can we ride out to the creek tomorrow? I want to show Grace the fish. If your mama says it is all right. Can we, Mama? Grace chimed in, following her brother. Daisy laughed. Yes, we can all go. We will make a picnic of it. The children cheered and ran off to play some more, and Samuel pulled Daisy closer. You are an amazing mother, he said quietly, and you are an amazing father. Our children are so lucky to have you. We are all lucky, lucky to have found each other, lucky to have this life. They sat in peaceful silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The years had not been without their struggles. There had been hard winters, sick cattle, money troubles, and all the normal challenges of raising a family. But through it all, they had faced everything together. Their love the foundation that kept them strong. Tom visited often, having become a devoted grandfather figure to their children. He was getting older now, his hair completely white, but he was still sharp and vital. He had told Samuel that when he died, he wanted the Circle T to go to them, a gift for the family they had become. You took a chance on a broken girl and a desperate cowboy, Samuel had said. We owe you everything. You owe me nothing, Tom had replied. You two rebuilt yourselves and gave me hope that good things still happen in this world. That is payment enough. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Daisy thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the auction block in Hawthorne to this porch, from terror and despair to love and joy. It had not been an easy path, but it had been worth every step. She had been sold like property, but a good man had given her the most precious gift imaginable, the freedom to choose. And she had chosen love. She had chosen Samuel. And that choice had made all the difference. What are you thinking about? Samuel asked, sensing her contemplative mood. About choices, Daisy said. About how one moment can change everything. If you had not been in that saloon that night, if you had not decided to bid, my whole life would be different. I like to think fate brought me there, Samuel said. Some things are just meant to be. Do you really believe that? I do. I believe you were meant to be free, meant to be loved the way you deserve. And I am grateful every day that I got to be part of that story. Baby James started fussing inside, and Daisy rose to tend to him. Samuel followed her into the house, and they worked together to get the children ready for bed, reading stories and singing lullabies until all three were asleep. Later, in their own bed, Samuel held Daisy close, and she felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. This was home, not the house, not the land, but this man who had loved her when she had nothing, who had given her everything without asking for anything in return. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. For what? For bidding, for letting me choose, for loving me. Samuel kissed the top of her head. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for being the best partner I could ever ask for. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Daisy's last thought before drifting off was one of pure gratitude. She had been auctioned off at 18 to a man of 60, but a cowboy had outbid him and let her choose. And she had chosen love, chosen freedom, chosen a future worth living. The years continued to unfold with all their joys and sorrows. The ranch prospered, and eventually Samuel was able to expand their holdings, buying more land and building up a respectable herd. By 1895, they were doing well enough that they could hire help, and Samuel was able to spend more time with his growing children. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with the same quiet integrity. He was 17 now, and already talking about his own dreams of ranching. Grace, at 13, was still wild and spirited, spending more time on horseback than on her feet. And James, now 6, was the peacemaker of the family, always finding ways to smooth over conflicts and make everyone laugh. Tom Brennan passed away peacefully in the winter of 1896, leaving the Circle T to Samuel and Daisy as promised. It was a bittersweet moment, grieving the loss of a man who had been like a father to them both, but also inheriting the land that had been their salvation. They ran both ranches together, eventually merging them into one larger operation that became one of the most successful in the region. In 1898, on their 15th wedding anniversary, Samuel surprised Daisy with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had been to a big city, and they were overwhelmed by the buildings, the crowds, the sheer energy of the place. But what Daisy remembered most was standing with Samuel on a hill overlooking the bay, his arm around her waist, both of them marveling at how far they had come from that terrifying night in Hawthorne. 15 years, Samuel said. It feels like yesterday and like forever all at once. I know what you mean, Daisy said. I still remember every detail of that night, the fear, the desperation, the moment you spoke up. I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen, standing there, refusing to cry, even though you were terrified. I was not brave. I was numb. No, you were brave, and you still are. You have faced every challenge with strength and grace. You have built a beautiful life from ashes. That takes courage. Daisy leaned her head on his shoulder. Drew, we built it together. I could not have done any of it without you. They spent a week in San Francisco seeing the sights, eating in restaurants, and rediscovering each other away from the daily responsibilities of ranch and children. It was magical, a reminder of why they had fallen in love in the first place. When they returned home, they found the children had managed just fine with the help of their hired hands, though the house was considerably messier than when they had left. Thomas had kept everything running smoothly, proving he was ready for more responsibility. Grace had organized a makeshift rodeo, nearly giving the hands heart attacks, and James had adopted a stray dog that he swore had followed him home. Daisy looked at her children, her home, her husband, and felt overwhelming gratitude. This was the life she had dreamed of during those dark days when she thought she had no future. This was what love looked like. Messy, chaotic, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful. The turn of the century brought new challenges and new opportunities. The West was changing, becoming more settled, more civilized. The wild days of the frontier were giving way to a more structured society, but Samuel and Daisy adapted, as they always had, finding ways to thrive in the changing landscape. Thomas married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch in 1902, and they built a house on the far corner of the property, starting their own family. Grace, true to form, did not marry until she was 25, choosing a cowboy who was wild enough to match her spirit, but steady enough to build a life with. James showed an interest in medicine and went away to study, eventually becoming a doctor in Reno, though he visited often. Samuel and Daisy became grandparents, delighting in the next generation. They spoiled their grandchildren terribly, taking them on rides, telling them stories, and passing on the values that had guided their own lives: honesty, hard work, love, and the importance of choosing wisely. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1908, their children threw them a huge party inviting everyone from the surrounding ranches. It was held at the main house, the same place where they had been married all those years ago, As Daisy looked around at the crowd of family and friends, at the children and grandchildren running around, at Samuel standing beside her still handsome despite the silver in his hair, she felt tears of joy. "What are you crying for?" Samuel asked, concerned. "I am not sad," Daisy said. "I am just so happy, so grateful. I keep thinking about that girl on the auction block, so scared and alone, and I wish I could tell her that everything is going to be all right, that she is going to find love and build a beautiful life." Samuel took her hand, his thumb brushing over the simple gold band he had placed there 25 years ago. That girl became an amazing woman, strong, kind, loving, the best wife and mother I could imagine. "I am the lucky one, Daisy. I got to spend my life with you." "We are both lucky," she said. They danced together as the sun set, moving slowly to music played by their children and grandchildren. Daisy rested her head on Samuel's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, the same heart that had been brave enough to speak up for her all those years ago. As the evening wore on and the stars came out, Thomas raised a glass to toast his parents. "To my mother and father," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "They taught us what real love looks like. Not the easy kind, not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that chooses to stay, to fight, to build something lasting. They started with nothing but love and courage, and they created a legacy that will last for generations. To Samuel and Daisy Reeves." "To Samuel and Daisy," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Daisy looked up at Samuel through tears, and he kissed her softly, tenderly, the way he had kissed her on their wedding day and 1,000 times since. The past 25 years had not been without challenges, but they had faced every one of them together, their love growing stronger with each passing year. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Samuel and Daisy walked together to the porch of their home, the same porch where they had sat so many evenings watching their children grow. The night was clear and cool, the stars brilliant overhead. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently?" Daisy asked. "If Murdoch had won the bid?" "I try not to think about it," Samuel said, "but I know this. You would have found a way to survive. You would have found your strength, one way or another. You are the strongest person I know." "I do not feel strong. I feel lucky. Lucky that you were there. Lucky that you cared enough to act. Lucky that I got to spend my life with you." "The luck was mine," Samuel insisted. "I was just a drifter before you. No real home, no real purpose. You gave me something to build for, something to believe in." They stood in comfortable silence, holding hands, reflecting on the long journey they had traveled together. From a terrifying auction in a dusty saloon to this moment of peace and contentment, they had built something real and lasting. "I love you, Daisy Reeves," Samuel said. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you, Samuel. You saved me, but more than that, you loved me. You gave me the freedom to choose, and I chose you. I will always choose you." The years continued to pass, bringing with them the inevitable changes of age. Samuel's hair turned completely white, and his hands, once so strong and sure, began to show the tremors of age. Daisy's dark hair also silvered, and her body, which had borne 3 children and countless years of hard work, began to slow. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, like aged wine. They had weathered every storm together, celebrated every joy together, and built a life that was far beyond anything either had dared to dream that night in Hawthorne. In 1920, they celebrated their 37th wedding anniversary quietly, just the two of them on their porch, watching the sunset over the land they had built together. Samuel was 71 now, Daisy was 56, and they had 8 grandchildren with 2 more on the way. "We did all right, did we not?" Samuel said, his voice still strong despite his age. "We did more than all right," Daisy said. "We built something beautiful, something that will last long after we are gone. The children will take care of it. Thomas has a good head on his shoulders, and Grace will make sure nothing gets too boring. Daisy laughed. That is true. And James will make sure everyone stays healthy. They sat in peaceful silence, and Daisy thought about all the moments that had brought them to this place. The fear and the courage, the hard work and the love, the children and the grandchildren, the quiet mornings and the starlit nights. It had been a good life, a beautiful life. Samuel took her hand, and she felt the familiar calluses, the strength that still remained despite the years. This hand had worked hard, had built their home, had held their children, had touched her with such tenderness for nearly 4 decades. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked softly. Daisy considered the question seriously. There had been hard times, painful times, moments when she thought they might not make it. But regrets? No, she said finally. Not a single one. Every choice, every challenge, every moment led me here, to you, to this life. How could I regret any of it? Good, Samuel said, because I feel the same way. Spending that $1,500 was the best decision I ever made. It was not the money that saved me, Daisy said. It was the choice. You gave me a choice when I had none. That was the real gift. And you chose love. Chose to build a life instead of running from the past. That took more courage than anything I did. As the last light faded from the sky, they went inside together, moving slowly but still in step with each other, the way they had moved for 37 years. They prepared for bed with the ease of long practice, and when they lay down together, Daisy curled into Samuel's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Good night, my love," Samuel whispered. "Good night, Nix," Daisy replied. "I love you." "I love you too, always." Samuel Reeves passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1922, just a few weeks after their 39th wedding anniversary. He was 73 years old, and he died the way he had lived, surrounded by love, with Daisy holding his hand. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, ranchers and cowboys from across Nevada, all of whom had known and respected Samuel. His children spoke about his integrity, his kindness, his unwavering love for their mother. His grandchildren told stories about riding with him, learning from him, being loved by him. But it was Daisy who spoke last, standing at the grave with tears streaming down her face, but her voice strong and clear. "My husband saved my life," she said. "Not just once, but every day we spent together. He showed me what love really looks like, what a good man really is. He gave me freedom when I had none, and he loved me without reservation or condition. He built a life with me, raised children with me, and created a legacy that will endure for generations. I was blessed beyond measure to be his wife, and though my heart is broken, I will never regret a single moment we spent together. Samuel Reeves was the best man I have ever known, and I will love him until the day I die and beyond." She lived for another 15 years after Samuel's death, long enough to see their grandchildren grown and starting families of their own. She remained sharp and vital, managing the ranch with Thomas's help, spending time with her family and keeping Samuel's memory alive through stories and love. When Daisy finally passed away in 1937 at the age of 73, she was buried beside Samuel on the hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Her children and grandchildren gathered to mourn her, but also to celebrate a life well lived, a love that had endured, and a legacy that would never be forgotten. On her gravestone, beneath her name and dates, Thomas had inscribed words that captured the essence of his mother's story. She was given a choice, and she chose love. And in choosing love, Daisy Bennett Reeves had found everything she had ever dreamed of and more. She had found home, family, purpose, and a love that lasted a lifetime. The girl who had stood terrified on an auction block had become a woman of strength, courage, and grace, proof that even in the darkest moments hope can bloom and love can triumph. Their story became legend in the region, passed down through generations. The ranch prospered under their descendants' care, and the name Reeves became synonymous with integrity, hard work, and the enduring power of love. Every anniversary, the family would gather at the graves on the hill, telling stories about Samuel and Daisy, ensuring that their legacy lived on. And sometimes on clear Nevada evenings when the sun set over the hills in shades of orange and gold, people swore they could see two figures standing on the porch of the old ranch house, holding hands and watching the land they had loved so well together for all eternity. The end.